Welcome to Cooking School with Mama Rowe. I'm your host, Ashley Rowe, and on this episode, we will be making baked chicken breast for a homemade chicken noodle soup and from-scratch biscuits. We're going to be teaching you how to bake chicken to make homemade chicken noodle soup. Our utensils and ingredients today are going to be obviously chicken breast, a pan to bake the chicken in the oven, and salt and pepper. We've taken our chicken breast out of the package and I placed it on the pan with my hands. So I've gone to the sink and washed my hands with hot soapy water to remove all of the bacteria that was on my hands from touching the chicken breast. You'll also notice I have lined my pan with foil. This is a tip I like to use because I don't have to wash my pan after I use it. You just simply remove the chicken from the pan, take the foil, throw it away, wipe your pan clean if you need to, if it has some residual juices or things on it, and you're done. So I also like to use tongs after I wash my hands. You can use them to put the chicken breast on the pan, or you can wait and put them on or use them as this process goes. So we're going to take our salt and pepper and we're going to season both sides. You're going to take a pinch of salt or your shaker and you're going to sprinkle or dust it high because it gets the most coverage without overbearing on your salt. So this is about maybe a quarter to a half a teaspoon on one side, and then we're going to pepper it the same way, high, because it makes sure it gets everywhere and you're not overdoing it on the seasoning. And then we're going to take our tongs and flip them over. We're going to repeat the salting and peppering. And again, it's about a quarter to a half a teaspoon if you need to measure it, which just kind of eyeball it, just kind of however you feel. If you like them salty, add more salt. If you like less salt, that's fine too. You can also use fresh cracked pepper if that's your go-to as well. And then I like to flip them back over and take the breast side up instead of the back with the tender that came from the bone. I like to have the skin side, which would have been the skin, out. I feel it cooks better that way. We also are going to put these in a 375-degree oven for 20 minutes, and we'll talk about the internal temperature of the chicken when they come out. The ingredients and utensils you will need to make your homemade chicken noodle soup are the chicken that we have baking in the oven. You also need garlic, celery, carrots, onion, medium egg noodles, fresh parsley, chicken stock or broth, and oil or butter. The utensils you're going to need are a medium stock pot, a liquid measuring cup, a long-handled spoon, a peeler, and a chef knife to chop your vegetables. Our next step for the chicken noodle soup is going to be working with our mirepoix, our carrots, celery, and onion. For the carrots, we have peeled and sliced them. For the celery, we have cut off the ends and cut them in half. And for our onion, we need a small onion, so we took a medium onion and sliced it in half and removed the peel. If you need information or a how-to on how to get to this step, please refer back to the salad or crudité lesson. We set our timer for 20 minutes in a 375-degree oven. You can see it looks cooked on the outside, but the internal temperature needs to be 165. As you can see, it's only about 130. We're going to put it back in the oven for about 10 minutes to make sure it's fully cooked. But if it's not fully cooked and you like to pull it out at this stage, you can, because it's going to go in the broth to cook longer. We have our carrots here. You want to put them on the cutting board where it's easy for you to work with. They're already sliced. I like to break them up in little bunches so that so they don't like flail out and make a mess. It's safer that way to chop. So we're going to put them all together. Use our knuckles like we've done before and just rock your knife back and forth and give it a nice rough chop or a dice. And then you can use the back of your knife or the blade of your knife and push them away, and then grab another portion of carrots and repeat until all of them are chopped. Now we're moving on to the celery. It's the same concept as the carrots. We're going to separate them so they don't spread out and we have an even chop as well. Use your knuckles with your knife and just run through the same kind of chop. Most chefs you will see take the knife and they cut the onion back towards them. That is very unsafe and according to Rachel Ray is unnecessary. I somewhat agree with her and I would like you to try and chop it that way. So instead of cutting it towards you like this, we're going to skip that step and you're going to cut from the root towards you, towards the other end. And all you have to do is just insert the tip of your knife and slide down. And you want them kind of maybe 1/2 inch to 1 inch width right down through here. And you can do on the sides too, like this. And then you're going to cut like we did in our salad video, a 1/2 moon. So use your knuckles again and kind of give it a wider chop or wider slice to make it more same distance or same chop as you have on your other vegetables. And if you'll see, the layers of the onion give you that nice dice that you're looking for without cutting towards your hand. Those are beautiful pieces of onion. If you feel like they're too big, just take your knife and just put it on the board and chop it again with your knife. But these will break apart once you put them in the pot. We have 2 kind of large cloves of garlic. I like garlic, so if you don't like a lot of garlic and you have cloves this size, go ahead and omit one of them. The easiest thing to do for this, to peel it, because you're gonna chop it up anyways, is to just smash it. So you take your knife, put it on the garlic clove like this, the blade away from you, take the heel of your hand and smash it. We're going to do that to both of them. And the peel, as you see, will come right off. So you remove the peel. Now if you're not chopping or dicing them, it's a little harder to remove the peel, and that's another step that we'll talk about possibly in our next video or sometime soon. So we remove the peel and then we just take our knife and we do a quick, what's called a mince. So we're just gonna chop it, or chop it, slice it up like we did the other vegetables. And then we're gonna use our knife skills, or our knife, to our advantage. You see how it's a rock, like it's not flat across, it's got like a little bit of a curve to it. You're gonna take it and put it down like this, and you're gonna rock back and forth with your hand up here on the tip. And you're just going to chop through it to mince it up. Now if you like bigger chunks of garlic in your soup, please skip this step and leave the big chunks. If you like finer chunks, keep going. This is a perfect size for me because it's not too, it's gonna cook down and it's not too potent once it's cooked at this size. So I'm gonna leave it chopped just like that. We have removed our chicken from the oven after we cooked it for an additional 10 minutes. You can see that the temperature is still climbing, so that means that it's pretty much cooked, and it'll cook more in the sauce as well. You can see here where I inserted the thermometer before, and the juices have run clear after baking it longer. This is a perfect example of cooked chicken breast. Now that our chicken is cooked and our mise en place is ready to go in the pan, or in the pot, I'm sorry, we're going to put the pot on the stove, add our oil, and start cooking. We've added our oil to the pot and we put it on a medium heat to kind of heat it up. And as that's going on, I want to talk to you about how to transfer your vegetables safely into your pot. Now, you will see on cooking shows, the chef takes their knife and they do this. This can be dangerous because the blade is at my hand. If I slip, I'm going to slice my hand open. Rachel Ray has taught her students, and on her show, to use the back of her knife to do the same thing. If you're still uncomfortable with this, you can use your hands by all means, or you can get what they call a bench scraper. A lot of pastry chefs use this. This one has a handle on it, but then some of them are just like a cardboard piece. It is what it looks like. And you literally just scoop it onto there, put your hand here, and dump them into your pot. And I know that my pot is ready because I hear the sizzling of my vegetables. We're gonna save our garlic for a little later so it doesn't burn. Our heat should be low enough, but just to ensure, because the garlic is small enough, it'll cook very quickly. So we're gonna put all of our vegetables in there and stir them around until the onions become translucent, and right before that stage, we'll add our garlic in. Our onions are almost translucent in the pot, so now we're gonna add our garlic. A good tip for you is after you chop your garlic and you have that garlic smell on your fingers, before you wash them or after you wash them while you're rinsing them, rub them on a spoon or on your faucet, because it's metal. It has that, I don't know exactly how it works, but I just know it takes the smell off of it. So you just kind of want to rub it on the metal piece and it'll take that garlic right off your hands. So now that we've added our garlic, we're going to stir it in and we're going to let it saute or cook slowly, because our mirepoix means to cook slowly. We kind of use the Holy Trinity and the mirepoix in the same sentence because we are cooking slowly and it's not a hard saute at like a medium-high heat. Now that we've cooked our vegetables down and our onion is translucent, meaning you can almost see through it or it has that shiny glossiness to it, we are going to add our 1 cup of water and our chicken stock or broth. The box is 32 ounces or 2 pounds, which also equivalates or is equal to 4 cups. If you need to measure that out for if you have 2 boxes of stock or whatever and you're using one up that you had previously. Now if you pull the stock out of the fridge, please bring it to room temperature. You can put it on the burner and bring it to a simmer to make sure it's room temperature before you add it to your hot pot, because it will slow your cooking process down if you don't. Now, my producer and camera woman, Tamika, does not like celery. So we were just chatting that you can cut any of these vegetables bigger pieces and still use them to cook and get the flavor, but then they're easy to remove if you need to remove them. Once this comes to a boil and kind of has all the flavorings we need in it, I'll go over that once we get to that stage. We're going to add our 2 cups or 1 pound of chicken that we've diced up. Before you add your stock and water to the pot, please make sure that you season it with salt and pepper to taste. So to have a teaspoon of salt and a half teaspoon of pepper, roughly. But of course it's to your taste as well. So before you add your stock and water, season with salt and pepper. We have covered our pot with a lid to ensure that all the heat stays in and the vegetables cook throughout. You can lift the lid about 10 minutes after you put it on to see if a carrot or celery is tender, like you know, kind of not mushy but not chewy, like snappy. You can use your spoon and take it out and just taste it. You want them soft. It's about 10 to 15 minutes or until that happens. So if it's sooner or a little longer, that's okay. 10 to 15 minutes is about an average time for you to have that happen. Since I like to use wood cutting boards, is my favorite cutting board my husband made for me when we redid our kitchen, and I love him for it every day. Because of the juices of the chicken, I like to get a fresh cutting board or a plastic cutting board that I can take to the sink and wash. Whether I'm using cooked meat or raw meat, the wood is porous and the plastic is not, meaning the porous will absorb the moisture or the water that is coming out of the food. So I've used tongs because this is still hot. I washed these are the same tongs I used earlier, but I've washed them to get all of the bacteria from the chicken off of my tongs. So I'm gonna, because this is still warm, I'm gonna hold the chicken with the tongs and I'm gonna just slice it in thirds. And now, because these are pretty big pieces, I like to cut them again in half, that third into half, to make it bite-sized chunks, because you're going to lay this down like this, and then you're going to slice it into chunks, because you don't want too big of a piece in your soup, because then it doesn't fit on your spoon with the rest of your stuff. So those are good sized pieces to be able to put, and if you feel like one piece is bigger than another, just slice it again, not a big deal. So we're going to move these out of the way and continue on. And you always want to cut with the flat side, the flattest side down, because then it doesn't roll away from you and make it harder to cut. It's safer that way. Now this one, yeah, we're going to cut this in half like this, lengthwise, and then we're going to dice it or chop it from there. Now a good tip too when you're doing this is, if you notice, I'm using the tip of my knife first, so I'll put the tip of my knife down and then I'll bring down the back of my knife and push forward. The most of your power is in the back of your knife or the butt of your knife, because that's where your hand is closest to, and this ensures that you get all the way through the meat and it's a safer chop. Now if I find a piece that I don't like because it's too big, I will use the tip of my knife. Like say this one right here is a little big, I'll hold it and I'll use the tip of my knife because it's a smaller cut. We have increased our heat to a medium-high heat, so we're going to bring this to a boil. And we're going to stir in, while it's coming to a boil, we're going to stir in our 1 cup of medium egg noodles. I just reused my water cup from earlier, so that's why it's stuck to the bottom. And then our 2 cups, I like to do an approximate 2 cups, but you can weigh it or measure it however you prefer. Be careful setting that in there because the hot liquid will splash at you or up to you. So just be careful as you drop it in. If you need to spoon it in there, please be safe and do that. I just feel comfortable dropping it in there. So we're going to stir this around and wait for it to come to a boil. When it boils, we are going to reduce the heat and simmer without a lid, so we're not going to cover it, for 7 to 10 minutes until our egg noodles are soft, or tender, I'm sorry, tender or cooked through and our chicken is heated through. So our sprig of parsley, we have our stem here, and all you do is just take your 1 thumb here and pull off the green flowery-ish leafy part, however you want it, whatever that's called. So you just hold it and pull it off. It can be a little tedious, but it's worth it, because parsley is actually a very wonderful garnish. But like I said, if you don't like it, totally leave it out. If you have family that likes it, don't add it into the whole pot if you personally don't like it, or if you have one person that doesn't like it, etc. However, leave it out and let them garnish their own soup themselves. We have removed our parsley leaves from the stems. We're just going to pile them together here. If you kind of want to fold them over a little bit, just to kind of get it into like a tunnel-ish kind of thing. I don't know how you want to call that. And we're just going to take the butt of our knife like we did our garlic, and we're just going to chop like this, rough chop down the tube of parsley. I know that's not a really technical term, but that's kind of what it looks like. And you put it back together in a pile. You see how it's just roughly chopped like this? And you're going to take your knife again, and we're going to do that rocking motion like we did with our garlic, and just run your knife through the parsley. Now if it gets away from you, like you spread it out a little bit, that's okay. Just use your knife in your hand very carefully and put it back together and do it again. You can go one way and then back the other way to ensure even chopping. And that is the chop for your garnish in your soup. We have let our mixture came to a rolling boil, and we reduced our heat to a medium-low heat to let it simmer until the noodles are cooked or soft or tender, and they don't have that bite to them. Our noodles are cooked all the way through. They're nice and soft. They don't have that bite to them to where they're crunchy. They're nice and soft. You can kind of see them a little limp here. Our chicken is heated through and cooked all the way through as well. And now When I tasted my noodle to make sure it was cooked, I needed to add more salt. This is the perfect time to taste your stock or anything in it with the stock to make sure that you have enough salt. So now that we're good on our pot, we're going to take our chopped parsley and we're going to stir it in before we serve it. Just like so. And again, you can use your bench scraper for that if you feel comfortable. It's just a habit of mine to use the blade of my knife. But please, if you do that, be very careful until you feel comfortable with it. But always be aware, because when you get too comfortable, that's when accidents happen. So here's our beautiful soup with the parsley in it. We're going to serve it up and show you what it looks like in a bowl. Here's our beautiful, tasty bowl of homemade chicken noodle soup with your baked chicken. Welcome to Tip Talk, at the end of the episodes, where we talk about the tips and tricks that you can use for the recipes we've made. We talked about getting the garlic off your hands during the cooking process. So just as a reminder, you can use the back of a spoon or your kitchen faucet. Just rub your fingers on that and it will remove all the garlic flavor and smell off of your hands. We also talked about using a bench scraper instead of the back or blade of your knife to transfer your vegetables into your pot. Please remember this so that you don't slice your hand open with your knife. It's safety first, always. We talked about chopping your vegetables larger so that you can remove them after the cooking process if you don't like them. I said my friend Tamika, who's my camera woman and producer, doesn't like celery. So she would chop her celery larger and then cook it through the process, and then as she serves her soup, she can remove the celery that she does not enjoy. Some things we did not talk about in our recipe are using unsalted broth. This ensures that you are able to salt as much as you want throughout the whole entire process, and it's not over salted. You control the salt, not the product. We also can use cooked chicken or leftover chicken. So if you made chicken the night before and you're like, hey, I got this leftover chicken, I want to make chicken noodle soup. Please feel free to pull this chicken out of the fridge, chop it up. It can be cold, it can be room temperature. Once you chop it up in the bite-sized pieces, you can add it to your pot and it will heat up in the stock. You can also use large noodles instead of medium noodles, depending on how much noodle or the look that you're going for in your soup. So please feel free to substitute those with other egg noodle styles. Also, you can cook your soup, omit the noodles, and freeze your soup without the noodles in them. When you are ready to defrost your soup, take it out, defrost it like you would, and then cook your noodles on the pot. You can cook them in chicken stock to give them that flavor, and then put the cooked noodles in the bottom of your cup or bowl and add the hot soup to it. And you have perfect chicken noodle soup, and you don't have to cook it all the time. This is a great method for when you're sick and don't feel like cooking. Thanks for joining us today on Tip Talk with Mama Ro. To go with your wonderful chicken noodle soup, from scratch biscuits. Stay tuned for how to. We are now going to make from scratch biscuits. The ingredients and utensils you will need are the following: flour, milk, baking powder, vegetable shortening, salt, and sugar. The utensils or equipment are a medium to large mixing bowl, your wet and dry measuring cups with measuring spoons, a biscuit cutter or a jar that's 2 to 2.5 inches in width, a fork or a pastry blender, a rolling pin to roll out your dough, and a wire rack to cool it on, and a baking sheet to bake it on. We have preheated our oven to 450 degrees. Yes, it's very hot, but that's what we need for biscuits. In the meantime, we have measured out our dry ingredients, our flour, sugar, salt, and baking powder. We've also measured out our shortening to add to this mixture. We've measured out our shortening, and the best way to get it out of the container or out of your measuring cup is to take your knife and insert it on the side and swirl around a couple times. It will actually just pop. You saw it's coming right out. It'll actually just pop right out with a little bit of force, and bam, there it is. So you want to get as much shortening out of your cup as possible and into the bowl, because that's what keeps this light and flaky. We are going to take our fork or your pastry blender or 2 knives, and if you have 2 knives, you're going to put them in the bowl and cut away from each other, or you can take your fork and all you're going to do is just push it down like your pastry blender or your pastry cutter, whichever you prefer to call it. And we're basically looking for pea-size bits of flour mixed with the shortening. And the more that you mix this in like this, the flakier your biscuits will be. We have blended our flour together, and it looks like fine crumbs. Like, so you can't even tell it's in there, but the flour is thicker than just being flour. So I like using the fork to do this, because then you can use the fork when you add your milk in to just continue to mix. Now, if you decide to use the pastry blender or the pastry cutter, please get whatever utensil you want to add this together. The less that you mix, the better, but you want to mix it together until the batter leaves the sides of the bowl. So you can stir it together, scrape the side of the bowl, and continue to mix this in until the batter leaves the side of the bowl. So you can see that the flour is all incorporated. This batter will be sticky and lumpy, which is okay because it'll smooth out when you need it. So it's not leaving the bowl completely, but I don't want to over mix it because it says to not over mix, which is totally fine. So this actually looks really good right here. I like to use my flour towel like we did for our bread. So I placed that down, I lightly floured the surface, and I used my fingers to bring the dough out of the bowl. That's the easiest way to do it, unless you want to use your fork and dump it out. Either way. So I have an extra cup of flour here, so I can dip my fingers in when it gets too sticky. I also have my rolling pin and my jar to cut my biscuits handy. So we are going to knead this 10 times gently. So last week when we did the bread, it was a little more aggressive because of the kind of dough we were using. So again, to knead, you're going to fold it towards you, press away with the heels of your hand. Now you see the dough got stuck on me, so I'm just going to use a little bit of flour and pull that dough off of me. And we're going to do it again, and then we're going to turn it and knead it again. And we're just going to keep kneading. And you can count if you like, just to ensure that you're doing it correctly. And if you over knead it just a little bit, that is okay. You don't want to over mix it, but the kneading helps get all of those little crannies of flour and everything mixed in with the shortening that the mixing of the bowl did not. So this looks like we need 2 more kneads, and it looks very good. There we go. Okay, so we want to form it into a little bit of a ball or a disc to make it easier to roll out. Like so. We're going to flour the top of this just a little bit. And you can take a little bit of flour off the board or out of your little pocket here and just kind of flour your rolling pin. You can also use your hands to do this like we did the bread. If you don't have a rolling pin, you just kind of pat it out like we did the bread and go from there. So we're going to roll it into whatever shape works for you that's a 1/2 inch thick. And if you need to get a ruler out, you may do so, because you probably needed a ruler if you didn't have a biscuit cutter to measure your jar or glass or whatever that you're using to cut your biscuits. So that looks about a 1/2 inch or so. And then you're going to take your jar or your biscuit cutter and you're going to dip it in some flour. I just use the residual flour and just kind of swirl it to coat the rim of my jar. Now, when you press down, you don't want to twist. You'll see some people push down and twist. Don't twist, because that cuts the gluten strands and it doesn't rise when it's baked. So we're just going to take it as close to the edge as we can and press straight down. You can kind of shimmy it back and forth, but you don't want to twist it. And you want to get it as close as possible to the next one. Now, we're going to remove these onto an ungreased cookie sheet. Just like that. And you place them about 1 inch apart, but if you want all the edges crispy, you can put them as close together, touching as you like. This is what it looks like when I've cut out for 9 of the 12 biscuits. Now I tried to get my glass all the way over here, but on the edge I don't get a full biscuit. So at this point, we are going to just fold this together. We're not going to knead it again, just kind of fold it together. And we're going to just form it up to that 1/2 inch again. You can roll it out to get those creases out. So we're just going to roll it out to that 1/2 inch again, but do not knead it because you've already done the kneading process. So we're just putting it back together, folding it in one fell swoop kind of thing. Roll it out to that 1/2 inch thickness like the other biscuits we've already cut. And then we're going to cut again. All the way close enough to the edges you can get, and then we're going to keep cutting. And this recipe yields 12. If you get a little more than that, that's totally fine. That just means you're really good at how close you cut together. We have more than 12 biscuits here, which is okay. This one here I actually formed with my hands and put it on the tray where it would fit. We are going to place this into a 450-degree oven for 10 to 12 minutes or until all the tops are golden brown. At 10 minutes, we checked our biscuits. They were not golden brown enough, so we left them for another 2 minutes, totaling 12 minutes in the oven altogether. When we remove them from the oven, the instructions say to put them directly onto a wire rack. So you remove them from the pan and put them on a wire rack. This allows the biscuits to cool all the way around from the bottom up to the top. Also, if you leave them on the pan, they will continue to bake because the pan holds the heat. You don't want them to bake anymore on the pan because that creates a brown, over-browned bottom. Now, this is my favorite one because this is the one I did not roll out. I formed it with my hands. You can see how it rose because it's separated in the lines here. This is what they call the baker's dozen. This is biscuit number 13, not really in this case, but this would be the biscuit number 13, and this one is for the baker. Fresh from the oven and ready to eat. Enjoy. Welcome to Tip Talk with Mama Ro. We're talking tips for biscuits. First, you need to make sure that your shortening gets all the way to the bottom of your measuring cup to make sure that you have enough shortening for your recipe. Secondly, you need to have flakiness in your biscuits. This is ensured by cutting in your shortening into your flour mixture completely. I like to use a fork to do the cutting in, or a pastry blender instead of the knives. But I also like the fork instead of the pastry blender because you can use the fork, one utensil, one thing to wash, to mix your milk into the flour mixture. If you're using a wooden rolling pin, when you wash it, do not submerge it in water. So meaning like don't leave it in the sink and let water run over it or put it into a full sink of water. You want to literally just run it through the water, a little bit of soap, pull all the flour and shortening or whatever's on it off of it, and dry it immediately so it doesn't warp the wood. When you don't have a biscuit cutter, you can use a jar or a glass to cut the biscuits. It says to use a jar or a glass that is 2 to 2.5 inches in width. So you take from one side of the jar to the other and measure it with your measuring stick. And this one is about 2.5 inches in width. So this was perfect for what they said, for what the recipe called for. When you roll out your dough, you want to make sure that it is a thicker dough because that ensures that you have a full dozen biscuits instead of more biscuits or less biscuits. You want to, if you're unsure, please get a ruler out or a measuring tape or however that has numbers on it and actually measure that 1/2 inch thickness to make sure that your biscuits are even throughout and that they cut evenly as well. Thank you for joining us on Tip Talk with your host, Mama Ro. Thank you for joining us today on Cooking School with Mama Ro. I'm your host, Ashley Rowe. On this episode, we've shown you how to bake chicken to make comforting chicken noodle soup and flaky from scratch biscuits. Enjoy making these recipes and much more. See you next time. Chicken noodle soup today, and you just hit record so I can have this as an outtake like Trisha Yearwood. Hey girl.
How does the chicken noodle soup taste? It's good? What do you like about it? The chicken? It's really yummy? And you give this recipe 2 thumbs up? Or just 1?
10.
10? That's a good chicken noodle soup recipe.